So you are quilting a large quilt and you are struggling to get even stitches, and you're getting short length stitches and long length stitches, and it's not looking as beautiful as you would like. What are the reasons for this, and what can you do to make things better? Now, I think the main reason you get uneven length in your stitches when you are quilting is because the quilt will not feed through the sewing machine. It can't feed through. It is in some way dragging. You know, it's a big thing. It's quite heavy. Those feed dogs and that foot are going to have to work really hard to try to get all that weight through the sewing machine. So the most important thing is to try to keep the work light so that it actually has freedom to move. So that means that if it's a big piece and some of it's on your knee, it's not just dragging over the edge of the table, it's lightly held on your knee, okay? And I don't think it wants to be spread out on your table. It becomes this big immovable thing. I think if you can bunch it up a little bit and give it some kind of air and space, it's more able to move through the sewing machine. So think about what you've got on the table, move all this stuff away, make sure you've got space for the work, and you can keep it all light. But there are plenty of other things that can help as well. And so what you can see here is that my sewing machine is set down into the table, and that makes a huge difference for the reason that I've just said, really, in that the work is evenly supported, it's less likely to drag, but it also means that I'm able to control the work through the sewing machine more easily because everything's on the same plane. When the sewing machine is not set down at the table and it's sat on the table, the work's got to kind of lift and be pulled through the sewing machine, which makes things harder. So if in any way you can have this type of system where your sewing machine is set down, it will make a big difference. On our Quilters Question Time website, on the questions page, I have information about this particular table, and it's well worth you going to our Quilters Question Time website questions page to look at that. And while I'm just mentioning that, my sewing machine is set very far back, so I've got about 11 inches from the needle point to the front of the table, so lots of supporting space there at the front. Now let's say you are doing regular straight stitch with the feed dogs raised, so this is not free motion work, okay? The foot that you choose can help. So a regular sewing foot may not be your best option. A walking foot may help you. And the walking foot or dual feed, which is a very similar thing, which is built into some sewing machines, helps to grip both layers and take them through the sewing machine. So with regular sewing, it's just the feed dogs, the teeth underneath the foot, that are taking the fabric through, but they're really only gripping that underneath layer. If you put a walking foot on or use your built-in dual feed, that acts in the same way, in that little teeth kind of grab the top layer as well. So both layers are being helped through the sewing machine as you stitch. So if you don't have a walking foot and you do a lot of that type of work, that is certainly something to look into. I also suggest that you don't have your stitch length too short with that type of straight stitch work. So have it at number 3 or 3.5. It just enables it to move through more easily. Now, another thing you might consider in the piecing process is how you press your seams. If you press your seams in one direction rather than open, you can get a great deal of bulk at the seams, and the sewing machine will be sewing along fine where it's just the normal 3 layers of the backing, the wadding and the quilt top. But suddenly you might get to a seam where you have 2 or 3 extra thicknesses of fabric, and the sewing machine will not manage it, and it starts to do very, very small stitches, and then when finally it gets over the seam, it will revert to a couple of long stitches as it kind of falls off the edge, and then it will go back to the normal stitch length. So if you press your seams open, what you are doing is distributing the bulk more evenly and creating areas that will have a little bit of extra bulk but not so much, and the sewing machine should be able to cope with those better than if the seam is pressed to one side. So to recap, sewing machine set down into your table if possible. Keep everything light, don't have it spread out flat, keep it slightly bunched up, don't have any weight on your knee. I certainly don't roll my quilt into a sausage, I just find that's totally uncontrollable. Think about lengthening your stitch length, think about the feet that you are using. Do you have a walking foot? Do you have dual feed? They might really help you. And then consider pressing your seams open, and all of those should help you make a better job of it, take some of the tension out of it, and make the process more enjoyable and the finished result even more excellent.